What actually happened that night in Brentwood is so much darker and more complicated than the circus trial that came after. We've been fed this narrative for 30 years now, this sanitized, celebrity-obsessed version of events that completely misses what was really going on. And honestly, it makes me furious that we've reduced two brutal murders to a punchline about a glove. June 12, 1994. A Sunday night. Nicole Brown Simpson is finally free. She'd left OJ for good this time. Not like the other times, not like the false starts, and the reconciliations and the cycle that had defined her entire adult life. She was done. 35 years old, 2 kids, and she was building something new. Something that was actually hers. She has dinner that night at Mezzaluna, with this trendy Italian place in Brentwood, where her friend Ron Goldman works. Her family's there, her parents, her sisters, the kids. Just a normal family dinner. Sydney's dance recital had been earlier that day, and OJ had been there too, lurking in the background, watching. Always watching. But tonight? Tonight was supposed to be Nicole's. Here's where it gets interesting, though, and this is something most people completely gloss over. After dinner, Nicole's mother, Juditha, realizes she's left her prescription glasses at the restaurant. Simple mistake, right? Happens all the time. Ron Goldman, 25 years old, aspiring actor, genuinely nice guy by all accounts. He volunteers to drop them off at Nicole's place after his shift ends. He's not her boyfriend, despite what the media tried to insinuate later. He's just a friend doing a favor. A favor that's going to cost him his life. Now pause for a second. Think about the timing of all this, the sheer coincidence required. Ron's shift ends around 9:30 p.m. He changes out of his work clothes, puts on a nice outfit because that's just who he is. The guy always looked put together. He drives to Nicole's condo on Bundy Drive. He's probably thinking he'll drop off the glasses, maybe chat for a few minutes, then head home. He has no idea he's walking into a nightmare. Meanwhile, Nicole's home with the kids. She puts them to bed, draws herself a bath, lights some candles. The house is quiet. This is what she wanted. Peace, independence, a life where she's not walking on eggshells waiting for the next explosion. And if you don't know about the history here, if you think this is just about a messy divorce, then you need to understand something. O.J. Simpson had been terrorizing this woman for 17 years. I'm talking about the 1989 incident where cops found Nicole hiding in the bushes outside their mansion, bruised and bleeding, screaming, "He's going to kill me! He's going to kill me!" I'm talking about the dozens of 911 calls, the documented abuse, the time he broke down her back door with a baseball bat. The stalking got worse after she left him. The part where he would watch her through her windows, call her house at all hours, show up uninvited, rage at any man who dared speak to her. But here's what makes me absolutely lose it. Everyone knows. The LAPD knew. They'd been called to their house repeatedly. Nicole's friends knew. Her family knew. And nobody could stop it because he was O.J. Simpson. The Juice. The football legend. To the movie star. The Hertz guy. America's sweetheart who just happened to have this one tiny flaw where he'd beat his wife unconscious and then smile for the cameras the next day. So it's around 10:15 p.m. now. Maybe 10:30. The exact timeline gets murky, and that's important. Remember that. Ron Goldman arrives at Nicole's condo on Bundy Drive. It's a narrow townhouse, nice neighborhood, gated community. There's a front walkway with those tall walls on either side, kind of creates this enclosed space. Bad place to be trapped, if you think about it. What happens next is, look, I have to warn you, This is brutal. And I'm not going to be gratuitous about it, but you need to understand the violence of what occurred to grasp why the trial that followed was such a complete perversion of justice. Someone attacks them. Multiple stab wounds. And when I say multiple, I mean Nicole had 7 separate wounds on her neck alone. Her throat was cut so deeply that she was nearly decapitated. Ron Goldman fought back hard, and we know this because he had defensive wounds all over his hands and arms. He fought for his life. There's evidence he struggled with his attacker for several minutes. They found his shirt pulled up, his pants pulled down from the struggle. He died slowly, bleeding out on that walkway while his killer stood over him. The savagery of it, though, that's what gets me. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. Nothing was taken. This wasn't random violence. This was rage. This was personal. This was someone who wanted Nicole Brown Simpson to suffer, who wanted her to know who was killing her. And Ron Goldman? And he was just in the wrong place at the worst possible time, and it cost him everything. Nicole's dog, a white Akita named Cato, is found wandering the neighborhood around 11 p.m., paws bloody, agitated and barking. A neighbor follows the dog back to the condo and finds the bodies. That's when everything starts moving very, very fast. LAPD arrives at the scene. And here's where the whole thing starts to fall apart from an investigative standpoint, because what happens next is either catastrophic incompetence or something worse. Detective Mark Fuhrman, remember that name because he's going to become central to all of this, he and his partner notice that blood trail leading away from the bodies. They find a bloody glove. They find a knit cap. And instead of securing the scene properly, instead of following protocol, they decide to drive to O.J.'s estate in Rockingham to notify him about his ex-wife's death. It's after midnight now. 4 LAPD detectives show up at O.J.'s mansion: Fuhrman, Ron Phillips, Tom Lang, and Philip Vanatter. And they claim, this is their official story, that they're just there to inform him of Nicole's death and make sure he's okay. That's it. Just a welfare check on the grieving ex-husband. Except they hop the fence to get into his property without a warrant. They search his grounds. They find more blood. Drops of blood leading from the Bronco parked outside to the front door and inside the house. They find a second bloody glove behind the guest house that matches the one from Bundy Drive. Do you see the problem yet? Because defense attorneys are going to have a field day with this later. No warrant, no probable cause, or at least not the kind that holds up in court. And Mark Fuhrman, the guy who found both gloves? He's got a history, a documented history of racial slurs, of planting evidence, of being exactly the kind of cop who gives the entire criminal justice system a bad name. But back to that night. O.J.'s not even home when they arrive. He's in Chicago for a Hertz event. Flew out late on the 12th, right around the time of the murders, actually. Suspicious? Yeah, you could say that. His daughter Arnell is there, though, and Cato Kalin, the house guest staying in the guest rooms. And Cato tells them something interesting. He heard thumps against his wall around 10:40 p.m., right around the estimated time of the murders. Loud thumps, like someone bumping into the side of the house. They reach O.J. in Chicago. He's informed his ex-wife is dead. His reaction is weird. He doesn't ask how she died. He doesn't ask if the kids are okay. He books the next flight back to L.A., and when he lands, when detectives want to question him, there's this moment. This brief window where maybe, just maybe, the truth could come out clean. But it doesn't. Here's what the physical evidence shows, and I want you to really think about this because the trial is going to twist it all into knots. There's blood at the Bundy crime scene that matches O.J.'s DNA. There's blood in his Bronco that matches Nicole and Ron's DNA. There's blood on that glove behind his house that contains DNA from all three of them. There are bloody shoe prints at the crime scene from size 12 Bruno Magli shoes. Rare, expensive, exactly O.J.'s size. There are fibers consistent with O.J.'s Bronco found on the glove at Bundy, and Nicole's blood and Ron's blood in O.J.'s house, in his bedroom, on his socks. The timeline works too, if you map it out. O.J.'s last confirmed sighting before the murders is around 9:35 p.m. The murders happen around 10:15. The thumps Cato hears are at 10:40, right when someone would be arriving back at Rockingham if they'd just driven from Bundy. O.J. is seen by a limo driver at 10:55, supposedly just returning from a jog or getting ready for the airport. He's agitated, sweating. There's a fresh cut on his hand that he can't quite explain consistently. And then there's the Bronco chase. Oh man, the Bronco chase. June 17th, 5 days after the murders. O.J.'s supposed to turn himself in, but instead he takes off with his friend Al Cowlings driving, O.J. in the back with a gun to his own head. 95 million people watch on live TV as they cruise down the 405 at 35 miles per hour. Police following, but not intervening because they think he might actually do it, might actually pull the trigger on live television. Is that the behavior of an innocent man? Is writing a suicide note that reads like a confession the behavior of an innocent man? Having your passport, a disguise, and $8,000 in cash is the behavior of an innocent man? But here's where America loses its mind completely. And here's why I'm so frustrated with how this entire thing played out. Because what should have been a straightforward murder trial, tragic, horrific, but straightforward, becomes this referendum on race, on fame, on police credibility, on everything except the actual question of whether O.J. Simpson murdered two people. And the trial starts January 24th, 1995. Judge Lance Ito presiding. Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden prosecuting. And on the defense, the Dream Team. Johnny Cochran, Robert Shapiro, F. Lee Bailey, Robert Kardashian. They're not there to prove O.J. didn't do it. They can't. The evidence is overwhelming. Instead, they're there to create reasonable doubt by any means necessary. And their strategy is brilliant in the most cynical, manipulative way possible. They put the LAPD on trial instead of O.J. They make it about Mark Foreman's racism instead of Nicole and Ron's murder. They suggest the evidence was planted, that there's this massive conspiracy to frame a beloved celebrity for murders he didn't commit. Never mind that this would require dozens of people, detectives, forensic specialists, the lab technicians, all coordinating perfectly to plant evidence across multiple locations. Never mind that some of this evidence, like the blood in the Bronco, was found before anyone even considered O.J. a suspect. The glove demonstration. You remember this. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. Cochran's smirking, while O.J. struggles to pull on leather gloves that have been soaked in blood and then dried. Of course, they don't fit smoothly. He's also wearing latex gloves underneath, and very obviously not trying to get them on properly. But it works. The jury sees it. America sees it. And suddenly, that reasonable doubt starts creeping in. The trial lasts 9 months. 9 months of testimony, of experts, of evidence that should have been slam dunk. The DNA evidence alone. This is 1995. DNA testing is relatively new, but it's solid science. And the odds of the blood at Bundy being anyone other than O.J. are 1 in several billion. But the defense brings in their own experts to muddy the waters, to make it seem uncertain, questionable. And the jury? The jury has been sequestered for months. They're exhausted, frustrated, wanting to go home. The racial dynamics are impossible to ignore. Predominantly black jury in a city still reeling from the Rodney King beating and the L.A. riots. Furman's tapes come out where he's using the N-word repeatedly, bragging about planting evidence in other cases. The defense isn't subtle about connecting those dots. October 3rd, 1995, 10 a.m. The verdict comes back after less than 4 hours of deliberation. For a trial that lasted 9 months with hundreds of pieces of evidence, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. That should tell you everything. Not guilty on both counts. Nicole's family collapses in the courtroom. Ron's father, Fred Goldman, looks like someone's reached into his chest and pulled out his heart. The prosecutors look stunned. And O.J.? O.J. smiles. 2 people were butchered. A 35-year-old mother of 2 who'd spent years trying to escape her abuser. A 25-year-old kid who was just returning a pair of glasses. And their killer walks free because the system, the broken, celebrity-worshipping, racially divided system, couldn't get out of its own way long enough to deliver justice. The civil trial comes later, and that jury, different composition, different standard of proof, finds O.J. liable for the wrongful deaths. They award the families $33.5 million. O.J.'s never paid it. And he moved to Florida, protected his assets, wrote a book called If I Did It, where he hypothetically describes how he would have committed the murders in detail so specific that it's basically a confession. And can we talk about that book for a second? Because If I Did It is one of the most grotesque things I've ever seen. The original title, before the Goldman family won the rights to it in bankruptcy court, was literally presented as a hypothetical. Here's how I would have done it. You know, if I had actually murdered my ex-wife and her friend. The descriptions are chilling. He talks about going to Nicole's house in a rage. He talks about confronting her. He talks about a knife. He talks about everything going red and losing time. And then suddenly there's blood everywhere, and 2 people are dead. It's not a hypothetical, but it's a confession with the thinnest veneer of deniability. And he was going to profit from it. That was the plan. Write a book describing in intimate detail how you murdered 2 people, slap an "if" on the front of it, and cash the checks. The Goldman family eventually got control of the book rights, retitled it with the "if" shrunk down to almost nothing, so it basically reads, I did it. And the proceeds go toward that judgment he'll never actually pay. But think about what that means. Think about Ron Goldman's father, Fred, having to read that book, having to see the man who killed his son describe exactly how he did it, while maintaining he didn't do it. Think about the legal gymnastics required in our system, where a guy can write a detailed murder confession, call it fiction, and that's somehow acceptable. And where does that leave us? 30 years later, what do we actually know? We know that Nicole Brown Simpson called 911 9 times reporting domestic violence. We know she told multiple people she was afraid O.J. would kill her. We know she wrote in her diary that she thought he was going to murder her and get away with it because of who he was. We know that the most dangerous time for a domestic violence victim is right after they leave, and Nicole had just left for good. We know Ron Goldman died trying to help someone, died fighting someone off with everything he had. We know his family has spent 3 decades seeking any measure of justice or accountability and getting neither. We know the physical evidence, the blood, the DNA, the gloves, the shoes, the timeline, all of it points to one person and one person only. Yet we know that person played golf the day after his ex-wife and her friend were slaughtered. We know he wrote, "If I Did It." We know he spent the years after the trial living in luxury in Florida, a state with laws that protected his NFL pension from being seized to pay the judgment against him. He played golf at exclusive country clubs. He signed autographs. He posed for photos with fans who either didn't care or didn't believe he was a murderer. He lived a life that Nicole and Ron never got to live. There was that incident in Las Vegas in 2007, the armed robbery case that finally put him in prison. And even that was surreal. O.J. and some associates breaking into a hotel room to steal sports memorabilia that O.J. claimed was his. He served 9 years. 9 years for stealing his own stuff, allegedly. 0 days for murdering 2 people. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, though some people called it karma, finally catching up. The Goldman family called it inadequate. We know he's dead now, died in April 2025 without ever admitting what he did, without ever giving those families peace. And we know that 2 people are still dead. Nicole never got to see her kids grow up. Ron never got to pursue his dreams. They're still gone. And the man responsible signed autographs at memorabilia shows until the day he died. That's the real story. Not the trial theatrics, not the celebrity spectacle, not the racial politics, though those matter too in their own ways. The real story is that the system failed. It failed Nicole when she was alive and calling for help. It failed her and Ron when it let their murderer walk free. And it continues to fail every domestic violence victim who sees what happened and thinks, nobody's going to believe me either. So yeah, another O.J. documentary. Because apparently, we still haven't learned the lesson. We're still more interested in the spectacle than the substance, still more willing to lionize famous men than believe battered women, still more comfortable with comfortable lies than uncomfortable truths. Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman deserved better. They deserved justice. They deserved to live. Instead, they got O.J. Simpson, and America chose to look the other way. I spend hours digging through reports, timelines, and court records to bring you accurate, long-form, true crime. If that's the kind of content you value, subscribe to support the work.